Hi, y'all. So, I had begun to type up on Facebook a whole experience, um, trying to convey my experience through a post on Facebook, and I was struggling with that, and there was just so much that I wanted to talk about, and it was taking forever, and it was just, you can't adequately describe everything through text. And so I decided I would do something a little bit different and try to do a vlog type thing, and just kind of go through my trip, because I know that y'all have been dying to hear about it. Since I got back, I've been resting, and I started work again, and so I would get home from work and I would be super exhausted, still trying to recuperate from being jet lagged and all that fun stuff. So anyway, I'm finally feeling more up to it now and wanted to share a little bit of my experience with y'all. So let's start with travel. So this was my first experience really traveling for like far away. Y'all know I've gone to Honduras several times, and that, I had a little short flight from here to usually Atlanta, like an hour flight, and then from Atlanta to Honduras, and that was just like 3.5 hours. And so I've never really experienced this kind of a travel day, long flight kind of deal, and we got to eat on the flights. That was fun. It was funny because the first meal that we got, I think it was on our trip from Atlanta to Amsterdam, and the first meal that they got us, we were on Delta, and they gave us two options, and the food, I texted my mom, we had texting abilities on their Wi-Fi, which was really cool. That was a new thing from any other time that I've flown. But we had two options, and the option that I chose was incredible. I texted my mom, I was like, this food is amazing. Like the flavor was incredible. And she was like, that's the first time I've heard that. It was weird. You don't expect to go on an airplane and have amazing tasting food, but it was good. Other flights had some interesting food. I'll show some pictures throughout this so that y'all can kind of see. But yeah, we had some other flights. I think from Amsterdam to Nairobi. That food was a little different. But anyway, the Delta food was good. But I was a little bit worried with the flying because I've never been one to be able to sleep in any kind of a vehicle, whether it be a car, a bus, a plane. I can't say train because I've never done any train travel really, other than a cute little Macomb trip. But I was a little worried because overall we had about 9 hours of flying. Obviously our travel time was longer than that because of layovers and all kinds of stuff. But I was worried, and I had thought about maybe taking some medicine to force myself to sleep on the flight if it came to that. But I tried the medicine a couple of days before I left, and I did not have a very fun reaction to that. So I just decided, you know what, I'm just going to tough it out and see what happens. Yeah, I did not sleep. It was miserable. I wouldn't lie. Especially when literally everybody else is asleep. And so you're trying to be really quiet, and you don't have anybody to talk to. And there's only so many, when you're exhausted. It wasn't that I wasn't tired. I was miserably tired and would have loved to be able to sleep, but I just could not fall asleep. It did not matter. Earplugs in my ears, or maybe playing some music or listening to a movie. I had an eye mask. I had a neck pillow. I had another separate pillow. I did everything I knew to do to try to go to sleep, and Nothing. But it was okay. I got through it. The next flight, that was the first flight. It ended up being, that one, the timing worked out for that one that it was overnight on our normal time. So it was during the night where I would normally be sleeping. The next flight, more people were awake for more of the time, and so I had more people to talk to. That flight was, the last 3 hours of that flight literally felt like 24 hours. It was crazy. But it was good. So we got to Nairobi. It was like, I think it was 10-ish their time. There's an 8-hour difference between us and there. They're 8 hours ahead of us. So anyway, it was about 10 o'clock that our flight landed, but then we had to go through customs and we had to get our luggage, and we also had to load up into the lorry and be taken. It was I think it was roughly about an hour drive. It may have been a little bit less, but about that long. To get to the house where we were staying that night, and they had dinner ready for us. We did not get there until around 1:30 in the morning, so we were all really tired. But they had a whole huge spread for us to eat, which we were thankful. We all ate, but then promptly went to bed after that. I slept for 2 hours that night. As soon as my head hit that pillow, just getting horizontal, that's all I needed. I was out. And so we had to get up super early the next morning and start our long haul to Kargi. And that ended up being a 16-hour travel day in the lorry. But it was so much fun. Even on my 2 hours of sleep, by the time I got to Kargi that night and was laying my head down to go to sleep, I had been awake. I had slept for 2 hours over the course of 63 hours. So I was exhausted. But anyway, so the lorry ride was so much fun. You would think, oh, you're in a big non-air conditioned truck, huge truck, for 16 hours. That sounds like it would be miserable. No. It was so much fun. We had several Kenyans who joined our team to go out to Kargi. So they were all from Nairobi, and they joined our team. And so we were getting to know them. Several of those people were ladies my age, and so that was super fun to get to know them. But they were a loud bunch, and I don't know how many of y'all know, but my family is a loud family, and we like to have fun. We play lots of games, and we like to have fun. And so I felt very at home with that, and we literally played games all day long. We played, one of my favorites was the line game. I did that with them, and that was fun. I don't know how known that is, but that was really fun. We played like spoons without spoons, which they called donkey, and instead of grabbing a spoon, you would grab your earlobe. So that was fun. We had a table in it, so they had seats. Most of them were normal charter bus seats facing forward, but then they had two that were facing each other with a table on either side, in the middle of them, and that was on both sides of the bus. So there were two tables next to each other, and so we were able to sit there and do some games. We did like heads up, we did charades. Charades was hysterical. That was later in the day, and we were driving on desert road by the time we were playing that, and we were hitting potholes and all sorts of stuff. And I mean, we would hit one of those and everybody would grab onto anything they could, and you just start seeing everybody do this number. And gosh bless it for anybody who happened to be standing up doing the acting for the charades when we would hit one of those. That was an experience. And I actually have a video. Maybe I can drop a little clip in of our shaking for y'all to see, but that was fun. So anyway, it was about the last 2 hours of that trip was a little long because we didn't get there until, well, it was probably 11:30, midnight kind of deal. So we were all tired at that point. But we got to go to bed after we ate again, a late night dinner again that night. We got to sleep in because we got a little bit behind on our schedule because we had to stop for stitches along the way on that trip. So anyway, we got a little bit behind schedule, and so we got to sleep in a little bit the next day, and then we went and all gathered, our team gathered, and we all took an opportunity to introduce ourselves, share some of our story, and that was really cool. We had several Kenyan pastors with us that week, and then we had like a little bit of an orientation, got some history on the area, some information about the culture and the people in the area, so that was really cool. Then we rested that afternoon. I got a little bit of a nap. So a good night's sleep and then a nap. We were off to a great start. That evening, we went to our first area where some Rendile people were living. And we did a WASH program, the WASH program is an organization that they go out and they teach hand hygiene and as well as take the opportunity to share the gospel. And so we got to be a part of that for the week. And so that was our first one. And that night, that was my first experience really with any... I want to say the word tribal comes to my mind. I don't know if that's the correct word or not. I didn't really think about that or hear it. But, it was kind of like a tribe, but that was my first experience with some of that. And so I think maybe that night I was experiencing a little bit of culture shock. I was pretty uncomfortable that night, and I kind of sat back, and we were with some people who had been there before, and so they knew how to interact with them and stuff. I wasn't really sure, like, would they be offended if I went up and, rubbed a little baby's arm that they were holding or whatever, so I really didn't know how they felt about like touching and just how they interacted. And so I kind of was a little bit more reserved that night and just kind of watching. Eventually, my blonde hair, blue eyes, and white skin attracted some teenagers. And after that, I kind of warmed up a little bit and felt better after that. But that was fun. The sunset, I remember that night, the sunset was amazing. One of the things that I've been telling people since I got back is that there is nothing like an African sunset. They were amazing. So beautiful, like no other. I mean, big orange suns, and you could just because we were in the desert, most of it was flat. There were some mountains around us everywhere, and so sometimes you would see it go down behind the mountains, but for the most part, a lot of it was flat, and so you would just get to see it so clearly just start disappearing, and it was so cool. I've got some pictures that I can show, but they do not, by any stretch of the imagination, show the incredible beauty that you see when you're actually there. The cameras just never capture the full beauty of a sunset. So, the next day, at this point, I probably won't go day by day. I might just hit some of the highlights because it's hard to remember what we did each day. And I could read through my journal, but that's a little much. Some of the things that we got to do that were incredible. We got to be a part of the first baptism in that area, and that was amazing. That was not planned, but we just happened to be there, and a Kenyan who joined our team had an inflatable pool, and we were able to fill it up with a little well in that area. But I think 11 years ago, a pastor felt called to go and start a church in an area where Rendile people live. And so that church is what we were doing the baptism for. And because of lack of a place to do it, they've never had a baptism. And so from the start of that church 11 years ago all the way up to when we were there 2 weeks ago, everybody who had accepted Christ got baptized that day. And so that was amazing. And I actually got to, so when after they were dunked and brought back up, the men had a towel and would wipe the men's faces, and then the women would wipe women's faces. And I was asked, as well as several others on our team, to do that. And so for some of the women who got baptized, I got to physically help lift back up out of the water and then dry their faces off. And that was so precious. What an experience. I was in the moment, and it was joyful and incredible to watch and be a part of that, but I didn't process it, obviously, in that moment, and didn't realize how amazing that opportunity really was and how special it was to me. And so after that, when I really started thinking about it, is when, I got moved to tears. It was incredible. My cat wanted to sit in my lap. So that was amazing, and being a part of they had waited so long for that baptism, and they believe in immersion baptism. And so I think there's some Catholic churches in that area that do baptisms, but not immersion baptisms. And so they had waited, and that was amazing to get to go and be a part of that. And then, let's see, the next day it rained. So right now in Africa, it's their winter. Winter. It's not by any stretch of the imagination a winter like we would imagine. In Nairobi, it was cool, and coming out, I don't say cold because it's not cold. It's still like in the 70s really for the most part. But coming from 100 degrees where we are here in Mississippi, but it was also where we were in Kargi, in the desert, it was really hot there too. And so being used to the hot weather, 70 degrees felt cold. And so the day that we got back to Nairobi, we were cold. Several of us got on a couch, and we layered like 2 blankets on top of us, and we were all like bunched together trying to radiate some body heat. Like, we were cold, and obviously no AC, no goodness gracious, heaters, like turn the heat on. So they did have a fireplace, and the night before they had a fire, but during the day they didn't have a fire. And so it's just, you bundle up as much as you can. And obviously none of us had appropriate clothing because we were in the desert, and we packed for hot. Now we had a sweatshirt, but sweatshirt didn't do much. But anyway, that was fun. I'd rather be cold than hot. Yeah, so the next day it rained, and that's where I was going with it being winter. Not only is it winter there, it's also the dry season. July, it's unheard of to have rain in July where we were. And it rained the next day. And the crazy thing that we learned after it had started raining, and we were like, y'all, it's raining in Africa, in the desert. I mean, that was incredible in the first place. We were thinking like, what is this? What is happening? We didn't realize how rare it was, though, until after. But we were talking amongst our team, and turns out that a couple of the people on our team had been praying the day before for it to rain at some point. And while we were getting ready that next morning, it started raining, and it was much cooler that day. It had been really hot. Some of us were really struggling with the heat, and it was really dry. And so the rain obviously brought some humidity, and so it was kind of it was some good respite for several of us. It was really refreshing. But it had been prayed for, and we were getting ready that morning, and sure enough, it starts raining. And it was funny because I was actually having my hair braided by my roommate that morning, and I'm looking out the window, and it's really windy, and it was overcast that morning, and I just start hearing something, and I'm like, that really sounds like rain on a tin roof, because we had like tin roof. I was like, that's really what it sounds like, but I know it can't be, because we're in Africa in the desert during their dry season. So, but anyway, we sat there and we were like, could it be? And then we started seeing it like accumulate on our window and everything, and we were like, shoot, that's rain. It literally was rain. So that was really neat, and it was a blessing to have that. It rained all morning and some afternoon into like mid-afternoon, and then it dried up and started getting warm once the sun came back out. But that was nice. And it also happened to be that day we actually had planned to get up earlier to go to where we were going. No, was that same? Yeah, it was. It was that day. So where we were going that day, to a different area where some other Rendile people were, we got up earlier so that we could go and kind of beat the heat. So we were going to go and spend some time in this area, and then we would leave like once it started getting really kind of hot, because there was really no shade. It was very bare area. There were no trees that you could go and take cover under or anything. And so that was our plan. And so because of the rain, we were actually able to go and spend a lot more time there. I think we did some gardens that day. I got to go and be a part of, our team was given water backpacks, like 150 of them to give out to these people. And the thing about, so obviously it being the desert, and there's no really good water sources in the area, which we were with Global Concern, and Global Concern is putting in wells. Ooh, Weasley. Putting in wells for some of those areas. And anyway, because there's a lack of water sources for a lot of the people, and sometimes they have to walk really far to go and get water, but they carry usually like jerry cans, and sometimes they'll have them on donkeys, or they'll have round ones that they'll have ropes connected to that they can pull behind, and they just roll behind them. So you see them carrying them all different ways. But so anyway, we had these little backpacks that were lined with plastic on the inside, and you could put water into them and fold them and tie them so that the water would stay in. But they also had like a little spout on the front of the backpack, so that they could use it however, not have to open the top of it, but they could actually get water from the spout. And that day we gave some out. Well, then we also, several of us took one and went with some of the ladies to their water source, which this one happened to not be super far away. It was like a man-dug pond kind of deal that was to collect rainwater during the rainy season. And so we all went, and they're the ones who, they would fill it up. They told us when we first got there, they told us that it was really slippery where they were, and then the water was really deep, so they told us to stay up. So they're the ones who went and filled up the bags, but then we would go and we would grab them, and then we would go and we would tie them off and just set them up until we were all ready to go. And then we got to actually physically carry some water on our backs back to their living area. And that was incredible, just to walk some in their shoes. And I can tell you, my bag was full. It probably was a little bit more uncomfortable than some others that weren't quite as full, but mine happened to be really full. And so it pulled my shoulders back really, really bad. And it was heavy, obviously. It wasn't unbearably heavy, but I was very thankful we didn't have any further to go. By the time we got back, I had knots all in my shoulders and my backs, and I was just like, wow, like, that was easy. It being a backpack and everything, that was easy, and we didn't have to walk very far. And I was just like, these women are tough. Some of them have to walk way further, and I mean, had it been in their summer and not in their winter, how much hotter it would be. And I can't fathom. They are so tough, having to go and get their water like that. And that's really probably a daily thing for them, especially if they don't have adequate, like totes and stuff to be able to go and have an adequate amount of water, So it was really cool to step into their shoes, and really experience on a small scale, what some of them experience on a day-to-day basis. And really humbling, for sure. So yeah, we gave out a lot of dum-dums to everybody that day, did some gardening, we played some games, and then I think that night I can't remember. So we also had some people there with us who were doing the Jesus film, and the U.S. team, got to be a part of that one night. But then I think each night that we were in Cargie, they were in a different area showing the Jesus film to different people. And that was really cool. That was a neat experience. Their Jesus film was in there, translated into their language, so that was awesome. Goodness. Oh, so we got to go and visit one of their churches in the area on the Sunday that we were there. And that was so cool to me. One of my favorite things for doing international missions has been, each time that I've been able to go to a different country, I've been able to also go to their church services and to see their culture and their different language and just the different ways, just to know, we're going into these churches and completely different languages, and yet that you're worshiping the same God. It's just so cool. We can be 4,000 miles away from home and go to a church and be with all these people who don't speak your language. And sometimes, because some of the schools teach English in their schools, there was, I think, one song maybe that they had been doing it in Swahili or Rendile, I'm not really sure, but then they started switching to English for a little part of it. And at one point, I think it said, "We worship the living God." And it's just so neat to know that we're all in there worshiping the same living God, but in different languages. And it actually, because I've been able to experience so many different languages and cultures in churches, it's always moving and humbling, and there's really no words to describe it adequately. It is absolutely one of my favorite things, and it reminds me of Revelation 5 or 7. Let's see, I'm gonna pull it up. So in Revelation 7, it's talking about it's in it's a scene of heaven, basically. And it says, after this I looked, and behold, a great multitude that no one could number, from every nation, from all tribes and peoples and languages, standing before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed in white robes, with palm branches in their hands, and crying out with a loud voice, "Salvation belongs to our God who sits on the throne and to the Lamb." And all the angels were standing around the throne and around the elders and the 4 living creatures, and they fell on their faces before the throne and worshipped God, saying, "Amen. Blessing and glory and wisdom and thanksgiving and honor and power and might be to our God forever and ever. Amen." And that's just, it says in verse 9, a great multitude that no one could number, from every nation, from all tribes and peoples and languages, standing before the throne, worshiping Jesus. And that is just a smidge of eternity that we get to experience on this side of eternity. We had several languages and peoples and tribes present at that church service, and it was just and it just reminded me, during that service I had been crying, but I sat down and I just had to look up Revelation, because I had just recently read through Revelation, so it was fresh on my mind. And so I went through Revelation to find that passage, and I was just like, this is just it's incredible. It's incredible to get to experience that. So that's one of my favorite things. Also Sunday. So I had originally, one of the reasons that I was thought of to go on this trip was there was a teacher / interpreter / missionary who had been in that area, who was working with some of the deaf kids in the area. And I was going to be going, potentially. We weren't 100% sure, but we were hoping that it would be the case. But I was potentially going to go and kind of come alongside him and help him and join him in his ministry or whatever. He ended up not being there. I think he has moved to a different area since he was last there. I don't know. But I was able to, because they knew that there were some deaf people in that area, deaf kids, and they knew that I was in the field, of sign language. And so they reached out to one kid in particular, and he actually came and met us before breakfast Sunday morning before church. So I went out, and now, the missionary who had been there, he knows American Sign Language. And so even though I was in Africa and knew, because American Sign Language is not a universal language, I knew that there was a good chance that I would maybe be able to communicate some with them, because the person who had been in that area was teaching or using American Sign Language. And so I went out to meet this kid, and he knew basic introductions, like, "Hey, what's your name?" And he could finger spell. Now he knew, he didn't know English, obviously, and so some of his finger spelling, even though they were letters that I knew, they were not words that I knew. So that was funny, but he did know cat and dog and stuff that he could finger spell, and we were able to do that. He knew some basic animal signs and stuff, but I had been told that he had not been formally taught much sign language at all. And so large portion of what he used to try to communicate were things that he had created. And so I took the opportunity to figure out kind of what he knew, but then also was trying to maybe teach him some other things so that we could communicate a little bit better. And so I was able to teach him some. And one thing, right before we went to church, I stood up and I grabbed a chair and pulled it over to me. And I sat down in the chair and I signed sit. And then I stood up and I signed stand. And I did that a couple of times. And after that, he was like, I could see the light bulb come on in his brain. You know, it was so cool. But he was like, okay, like he connected the concept with the sign, you know, and he had somebody that he knew with him, and he was like, stand and sit, like, did you see that? Like, that's so cool. And at church, I had him come and sit by me, and no lie, every time we sat down or stood up, he would tap me on my shoulder and he would say, sit down. And he would tap me on my shoulder and he would say, stand up. And so every chance that he could, he wanted to use those signs that he had just learned. He was so excited, and to know that he understood that and remembered and was able to use them was really neat. And it was just that open, like that gave me a desire and a hunger to really try and be there and spend more time with him. Unfortunately, my time with him that day was a little bit short because we had to go and do some other stuff that day. But the last day, we got the chance to go to where the area that he lives. And while the women and men and children went elsewhere, and they shared the gospel with them and did like some activities and stuff with them, I actually took this kid, and he and I sat down, and I had found I didn't have the materials and stuff that I would have liked to have, you know, because we were in the middle of the desert. There's only so many things you can point to and teach, so it was kind of difficult to kind of get a basis, you know, of language. But we did have some Mickey Mouse flashcards, but I mean, it had like hat, shoes, airplane, some different animals, some foods. And so we were able to go over some of those things, and that was really neat. And then after that, we just kind of walked around, and I was pointing at different things, different colors, and anything that I could see that I knew I could help him understand and connect a sign with, is kind of what I was going for as best as I could, you know, with what I had. I wish so badly that I could just sit down and have him and others in the area and just grow the language there. You know, I hate to think of him. He's graduated his high school, and he doesn't have the means to go. They have a deaf school in Kenya, but it's far away, and he doesn't have the means to go to that school. And so I hate to think that he's sitting in his house with no language. That's heartbreaking. And I've also been told that he's incredibly smart. And so I just hate to think that that's his future. Nobody should live like that. And so I was super thankful for the time that I had with him, and he was so fun. I mean, he was happy, and he was eager, and it was precious. And that, I think that opened my eyes and revealed to me another passion, you know, that God has given me. So who knows where that'll lead in the future, but wow, that was amazing. You know, I've been on missions, but I've never had my field and my passion. And really, I mean, God has led me to where I am in my field of, you know, as an interpreter. And there's no doubts about that because of the path. You know, I can look back and just remember everything that God did to get me where I am. And so it's a huge passion and desire for me. And so to have international missions, which is a desire of mine that God has given me, and then as well as, you know, what I do for a living and that passion, and for those two things to combine was awesome. That was so fun, so cool. What are some other things? Oh, okay. So I think I'm just gonna go through at this point, and just kind of talk about some random things. And I've got some pictures that I can maybe, hopefully, if I can figure out how to do it. This is a first time for me, but I'm gonna see if I can like add some pictures into this video so y'all can see while I'm talking. But let's see. I'm gonna start at the beginning of my pictures and kind of just go through. So one thing that was funny that was an experience. So on the lorry, about, honestly, I don't remember. I say like 6 or 7 hours, but I really don't know. A lot of our travel when we were going from Nairobi to Kargi was in the desert, and there are a lot of bushes in that area. And anyway, so one day, the day that we were going to Kargi, it was starting to get dark, and so they stopped and they told us, hey, it's about to get dark, so we're going to stop and we're going to do a health break, so that we're not having to worry about like hyenas or, you know, any kind of critters or animals that could be out after dark. So go now. So literally this health break was us grabbing some toilet paper. The guys went to this side and the girls went to this side, and you disperse out and you go find a bush area that nobody else is in or walking by, and you go to the bathroom. That was a hilarious experience. So after that, several of us were saying, I am one with nature. But then also along the lines of potty, their bathrooms were, squatty potties. I say literally a hole in the ground that you've got to figure out how to maneuver and go to the bathroom using. So that was fun. I'll add some pictures so y'all can see those. One of which was like an outhouse in the middle of the desert that was more than just a hole. It was a little bit nicer. It had been well designed. It wasn't just a carved out hole in concrete or whatever. But then we also went to one in the city at one point, and it was the same. It was the same deal. Which, there were also toilets in some places. This bathroom was free. That was the squatty one. But then you could go and pay and actually have like a normal toilet, like we know. And so they had both. It wasn't just one, you know. Seeing the sunrise and sunsets flying was so cool. I'll add some pictures. Scenery was really cool. You kind of saw a little bit of everything. You see city life and you see city buildings and the look of that, but then you also see some tropical and farmland, and then you see some mountains, but then you also, like, after the mountains, you get to the desert, and so then at that point, you're not on roads anymore, you're just on sand and dirt. And so you kind of saw, like, through that 16 hours, you kind of went through everything, and that was kind of neat. The kids were precious. Oh my word. And they loved Dum-Dums. If you gave out Dum-Dums, the crowds would follow. And that was so funny. I'll post some pictures that I got. One of the little girls, we saw her several times. I got a picture with her because we were about to leave, and I was like, I want a picture with that little girl. So this little girl, she was so funny. She would always like come to me, like look at me or whatever, and I would, show her that I see her, and I would tease her with a facial expression or whatever, come walking after her, and she would laugh so hard and she would run away. And so that was kind of our experience or whatever. I would sometimes we would come together and we would fist bump or whatever, but she loved that. It was almost like a hide and seek or tag kind of deal. And I saw her several times, and each time that's what we would do. And anyway, so I had to get a picture with her to remember her face. At one point, Jess and I found ourselves in the middle of a group of the women in one of the Rendile areas, and they had this tribal dance that they would do, and it was like, it's something to do with like they would move their head. I could never figure it out. Like, it looks like it's simple, but I'm not a dancer. I'm not coordinated in that way. But I could not figure it out, even as simple as it was. But they had this grand idea to throw me into the middle of this huge gathering. And I've got a picture of Jess and me outside of it, but not inside of it. But, and they threw me in, and they threw Jess in at one point too, and they wanted us to like do that little dance, and it was hysterical. They thought it was so funny. I mean, they're like, who are these white people who can't dance? I know. That was funny. I'll show some pictures of that. We got to go on a safari. That was super fun. But it was so funny because the safari was when we weren't in Nairobi at this point, but we were, I think, like 3 or 4 hours from Nairobi. So we were not in the desert as far at this point. And so it was chillier. We were all, that night, we were in like our sweatshirts and stuff. And that was just so funny. Like, to think, we're in Kenya, Africa, on a safari, and we're cold. And that's, you don't think of that. You don't think of an African safari being cold. So that was kind of funny. And then the Kenyans that we were with, they were really cold. If the Americans were cold, we knew that the Kenyans were freezing. Bless them, they were so cold. But to some degree, it felt really good. Like, we had our windows down and stuff, and we were bundled. I love being in sweatshirts, and so I was cozy. We stayed at an incredible resort that night, and so after staying like in the desert with no running water or anything, that was a treat. And it was fun. It was still like it was a tent, but it was a glorified, incredible, like done up tent. And it was right off, like, I sat out that night. I connected to their Wi-Fi because they had some Wi-Fi, and I FaceTimed my parents, but we literally had animals right there in front of the tent. It was so cool. I made some hot chocolate. They had an electric kettle and had some tea and hot chocolate. And so I got some hot chocolate that night because it was chilly. And I sat out there and I FaceTimed my parents, and that was so fun. Such a treat. And it was beautiful there too. So going to Kenya, I was expecting to be staying in tents. And so we took like sleep sacks and stuff like that. We were really expecting to sleep in tents. But they had enough rooms where we were that the American ladies and then I think 2 other Kenyan ladies got rooms with beds and a bathroom. And it had a toilet. The toilets did not flush, but they were toilets. So that was nice. So we did not have to rough it quite as much as we were expecting to. And so that was nice. But a lot of the guys had to sleep in the tents. So I'm sure they even more so enjoyed where we were staying this one night. Let's see. Yeah, we got to go to the equator. Like on our safari, there was a marker showing the equator, and that was really cool. Like walking along the line and like standing on it with one foot on one side and one foot on the other. That was really fun. I ate goat for the first time. That was an experience. It tasted great, but like I struggled with the thought of eating goat a little bit, especially because I think goats are so cute. Like I don't think of goat as food, but it's totally, they eat a lot of goat there. And so that was on the menu a lot. And I did it. I was not willing to not do it and try it, but that was an experience for sure. It was really, really fun to get to know the ladies that were on the trip that were my age. But I mean, they live in Nairobi. And so we were raised a lot similarly, but also very differently, and kind of being to some degree in the same like phase of life was really kind of cool. Like talking about the renting and buying houses and, you know, different stuff that are relevant to our age right now. That was really cool to see the differences of that, but also just to, I mean, I feel like I made some lifetime friendships with them, and that's been super, super cool. We're like planning all sorts of stuff in the future of like getting together, whether it's me being there in Africa and Kenya or them being here in the States. Like, I think we will probably forever keep in touch. It was really neat flying over, you know, at one point we flew from Atlanta to Amsterdam to Nairobi going there, and then we flew through Paris, from Nairobi to Paris, France, to Atlanta. Yeah. And then to Jackson. And so it was really neat to fly over, like doing the flight tracker and seeing where we were, what we were over, and being able to look down and like see those areas. Like, oh my gosh, that was so cool. Like we flew over Dublin, Ireland at one point, and we flew over Egypt. And so being able to look and see where we were, but then also being able to look out the window and see the land was really neat. We had a layover in Paris, and I got a croissant, and I got some tea and stuff, but that was really fun. And I joke saying that we looked for the Eiffel Tower. We looked, like landing and then taking off again. Like we looked all around us. We didn't really know where it was specifically, but we tried to see it. And I saw one thing that I was like, I think that could potentially be it, but I was not sure enough to be able to say, oh yeah, I saw it, you know. But I joke and say that I saw it, but I'll post a picture of our Eiffel Tower that we saw while we were in Paris. Oh goodness, sleep deprivation was a thing. We had some of us on the team, aka cough cough, me and Jess specifically, had the giggles a lot on this trip. Oh my word, we were just so exhausted, and it made us laugh a lot, and it was pretty funny. We were basically children again. We could be adults when we needed to be, but we enjoyed ourselves. It was fun. Trying to think of if I missed anything. I'm sure as soon as I turn this video off, I'll remember several things that I wish I had talked about. But it's all good. I can post about everything too. Anyway, I think that pretty much covers most everything. But I really appreciate y'all's support. I had to fundraise really quickly. You know, this kind of it was dropped into my lap, as several other trips have been as well. And it was really soon, you know, like our deadlines for our payments and stuff. And so fundraising was not stressful. Y'all stepped in and were amazing to follow God's calling in giving towards that. It was incredible. But yeah, I appreciate y'all's support and your prayers through all of this. I can't wait for this to go out so that y'all can, goodness, this video is 54 minutes long. I don't know who will actually watch this video, but for those of you who want it, it's here. So I love you guys, and I will see y'all later. Mr. Preston, you're on film,
yes.
And I need to ask you a question.
I mean, I have to be honest and truthful about whatever you're about to
Okay, so we've been on this lorry for 13
Yes.
hours now, right?
Has it been that long?
How? Yes.
The time just
Yes.
flies by when you're having fun.
How much longer do we have?
Like 20 kilometers.
I'm
Not
gonna
yet scored.
say
Yes, we have to look.
Oh, dust. Oh, dust.
I'm
Dust
gonna
storm.
say about 2 hours.
Okay, so it was 2 hours into the journey, and then 4 hours into the journey, and then 6 hours into the journey.
God is bigger than time, and so who are we to really put these man-made restraints on what God wants to do? Right? So, what is 2 hours anyway?
I like that.